In this video I'm going to show you how to replace the rear brake fluid on a 2008 Harley Davidson Road Glide. On this particular bike you need to remove the right rear bag to get access to the rear brake caliper, which is right here, and the master cylinder and brake fluid reservoir is right down here near the front of the bike. Before I start working on the bike, I always like to clean this stuff off to prevent any dirt from getting into the brake system. You can use brake cleaner, or just if you don't have that, just make sure you wipe it off with a rag just to remove any dust and dirt that can get into the reservoir there. After I clean off the brake fluid reservoir, I'm going to remove this brake fluid reservoir cover. It's held on by 2 Phillips screws. Sometimes these are difficult to get off, not the screws but the cap, is because it's been in place for so long it's kind of sticks to the reservoir, so you might have to tap it with a rubber mallet or something lightly until it breaks free. And remove the cap, and then you can remove this diaphragm. When you're doing this kind of stuff, make sure that you don't get brake fluid anywhere, and if you do, clean it off right away, because brake fluid will harm paint finishes and chrome finishes. With the brake fluid reservoir cover off, you can inspect this rubber diaphragm. Just make sure it's still flexible, and look at it all over and make sure that it's not cracked anywhere. I'm going to be using this Mighty Vac vacuum pump to pull the old brake fluid out of the brake system, and the way that this is going to work is there's a hose here which is going to be attached to the bleeder screw on the rear caliper, which goes to a reservoir here which is going to catch all the old brake fluid, and then there's another hose connected to the reservoir that goes back to the vacuum pump. I'm going to be using between about 5 and 10 Hg constant vacuum to pull all that old brake fluid out of the rear brake system. This is my rear brake caliper, and this is my bleeder screw, which is takes a 3/8 wrench to open it up. There's a plastic cover for it. You need to remove that. Then I attach that hose that I referred to from my vacuum pump to the bleeder screw, but before I do that I need to attach the wrench so I can loosen it up and tighten it. And I'll attach the hose here. You want to be real careful again about getting brake fluid on these painted surfaces and your chrome finishes, because it will ruin the finish. So here's my setup. I've got my vacuum pump here connected to a hose, goes to my brake fluid reservoir. Another hose goes to the bleeder screw on my rear caliper, so I'm ready to pull this old brake fluid out. I'm going to open up the bleeder screw. That should be enough. You might have to turn that a little bit more, but I think it's enough. And then I'm going to pump this up between 5 and 10 Hg. And keep a vacuum on this, and you can see the brake fluid starting to come out. So I'll be back when this is about done. When you start to get all the brake fluid out of the system, you see you get a bunch of bubbles here, and eventually it will clear up and you'll get nothing, which is where we're at right here. So all the fluid is out of the system, or most of it anyway. I'm going to leave this vacuum pump attached to the rear brake caliper bleeder screw, and now I'm going to, since all the brake fluid is, almost all of it is out of the rear brake system, I'm going to come over here to the reservoir. You can use I forgot what it's called, but there's a thing that looks like an eyedropper. But it's much larger, and it's used for cooking. You can use one of those to get every last drop of brake fluid out of your reservoir, but I seem to have misplaced mine, so I'm just going to leave that the way it is, and I'm going to add new brake fluid to the reservoir. You should use a .4 brake fluid in this bike. I'm going to fill it to the full mark, and then go back to my vacuum gauge and suck this new brake fluid through the system. But when I do that, I have to keep an eye on this to make sure that this doesn't go empty, because it will introduce air into the system. So you got to keep an eye on that while you're vacuuming the new fluid through the system. With the brake fluid reservoir filled with new brake fluid, I'm going to pump this vacuum pump up to between 5 and 10 Hg, and pump all that new fluid. You can see the air coming out of here, but I got to also keep an eye on the reservoir to make sure that it never goes empty. And also keep an eye on the vacuum pump, make sure that it's always got some vacuum. And then just wait until that you start to see that clear new fluid coming through this hose, and no air in the line, and you'll be done. Okay, yeah, I've still got a vacuum on the line, and you can see that the fluid coming through this clear hose is still clear and there's no air bubbles, so I'm done pulling the new brake fluid through the rear brake system. Still got 5 Hg on the vacuum pump, and still got fluid in my reservoir, so I'm ready to close off this bleeder valve. Now I can tighten up this bleeder screw, and I'm ready to remove the hose. Before you pull this hose off of the bleeder screw, make sure you got some vacuum in your vacuum pump. That'll help pull up any brake fluid that's still in this hose, and lessen the chance of it coming out of the hose when you pull off the hose from the bleeder valve. Now clean up any brake fluid that may have dropped on the caliper. You can use a brake cleaner. Or if you don't have that, just use a rag to wipe it up and make sure everything's clean. Then you can reattach this plastic cover for the bleeder screw. With the new brake fluid pulled through the rear brake system, all the air out of the lines, you can fill up your reservoir, which I've already done. Fill it up to the full mark. This is also a good time to make sure that your brake pedal is hard and not soft when you press down on it. Unfortunately, I can't because the bike's on a lift and I'm using this tie down to hold the bike upright, so I'll do that as soon as I get the bike off the lift. Now take your diaphragm, brake fluid reservoir diaphragm, make sure it's in the correct position. Sometimes when the brake fluid lowers, it pulls this diaphragm down with it, so it kind of looks like this when you take it off the bike. Just make sure that it's back in its original position. This diaphragm is used to vent the brake fluid reservoir to the atmosphere so that the brake fluid can lower, and it also kind of creates a barrier between the brake fluid and the air. That way it's less likely the brake fluid attracts any water. That's why you should replace the brake fluid every 2 years, because it attracts water, and water contaminates the brake fluid. Now take your brake fluid diaphragm, put it back on the cap. This is the way I do it. You could put it on the reservoir first, but I think this is easier. Put it back on the cap and reattach the cap to the reservoir. And then tighten it down. Now make sure you clean off your reservoir. You're going to have brake fluid dripping down the side. Use a rag. If you have brake cleaner, use some brake cleaner, spray it on the reservoir, get all that brake fluid off, and then clean that up. When you're all done, make sure your brake pedal is hard, it's not soft. Make sure your reservoir isn't leaking. Make sure your bleeder screw is tight, it's not leaking any brake fluid. And then take your bike out for a ride. go slow at first. Just make sure that the brake's functioning properly before you start riding hard. Just take it easy at first until you make sure everything's working correctly. Hope you found this video helpful, and thank you for watching.